The galaxy had whispered of Earth long before the first envoy dared set foot on its soil. To most spacefaring civilizations, it was a blue that shrouded in legend, a death world, a place where gravity clung too tightly, weather turned violent without warning, and the native species clawed their way to dominance through blood, fire, and cunning. The designation alone had made Earth a curiosity at best, a threat at worst. But curiosity had its price, and arrogance would become its debt. Commander Track of the Varelian High Guard had never understood the fuss. A veteran of 14 planetary campaigns, Track had seen death in 100 forms. He had watched suns collapse and oceans boil. What could a species of soft-skinned bipeds teach him about war? Nothing, he thought, until he met the cadets. It started with a joint training initiative. The Galactic Concord, in an effort to promote unity and prevent another incident like the Relic collapse, had ordered an exchange program. Each allied species would send its best young warriors to train together. Earth had sent 10. Lieutenant Ray Vanson was one of them. She was a kind of soldier whose presence quieted a room, not because she demanded it, but because others instinctively adjusted their energy to hers. Her frame was lean but powerful, her stance relaxed yet alert. There was something unsettling about her calmness. It wasn't arrogance. It was something older, colder, like she'd already made peace with whatever might kill her. Track observed her from the balcony of the orbital training station, where the cadets had gathered for their orientation. The other humans, diverse in size, color, and temperament, stood out among the more elegant, less physically robust alien species. They laughed too loudly, touched shoulders, and used facial expressions in ways that unsettled their counterparts. They were chaos dressed in uniform. Ray locked eyes with him for a fraction of a second. She didn't smile. She didn't nod. She just looked. Track felt it. Not a challenge, not a threat, just the sensation of being measured. The first test was simple. Survival simulation. A fabricated jungle environment seeded with hostile drones and unpredictable weather patterns. All cadets were dropped in separately, tasked with reaching the extraction point in 20 hours. The Varelians finished first. The Jalari followed. The humans came last, but they brought everyone else with them. Track watched the replay footage in stunned silence. Ray had found 3 injured cadets, non-human, non-allied, and carried them for miles, treating wounds, rerouting paths, setting traps. When her team reached her, they didn't take command. They followed. By the end of the sim, half the group had rallied behind her without orders. She never barked a command, never gave a speech. She just moved forward and made surviving look like something contagious. The High Guard's initial reports dismissed it as luck, an anomaly. But anomalies don't repeat themselves. In the weeks that followed, the simulations grew harder. Arctic wastelands, asteroid shipwrecks, toxic deserts. Ray and her team adapted like they'd trained on chaos. They didn't outgun or outrun their competitors. They outlasted them. Humans failed the least because they prepared for failure the most. One night, during a rare moment of downtime, Track approached Ray in the mess hall. She was sitting alone, cleaning her sidearm, not eating. Her eyes flicked up to him as he sat across. "You don't sleep," he noted. "You don't blink," she replied, not unkindly. Track's mandibles clicked in mild amusement. "Your species is unpredictable. That's just what predictable looks like to you. You improvise too much. Your tactics are disordered." She gave a half shrug. "So is a universe." He studied her a moment longer, then leaned forward. "Why do your kind survive? Your bodies are fragile. Your weapons inferior. You bleed too easily. Yet in every trial you come out breathing." Ray met his gaze again, and this time she did smile. It was a small thing, tilted at the edge of her mouth like a secret. "Because we had to learn how to die before we learned how to fight." The simplicity of her answer disturbed him more than any war story could have. There was no bravado in her voice, no desire to impress or intimidate, just truth spoken like gospel. The final simulation was not a simulation at all. Without warning, the orbital station was attacked. A pirate fleet, believed had been dismantled years prior, had reformed, targeting Concord facilities in revenge. Power dropped. Lights died. Air thinned. The training grounds became a war zone. Most cadets froze. Some panicked. The command structure fractured instantly as instructors scrambled to secure their own. Track rushed to control room, issuing evacuation orders, only to find that a human team had already begun rallying others. Ray led the charge through flame and decompression zones, navigating blind through failing corridors. She carried one cadet on her back, pulled another from beneath wreckage. She didn't stop, didn't slow down. She wasn't fearless. Track could see the tension in her face, the sweat on her neck, the 1,000 calculations behind her eyes. But she moved anyway. In the end, casualties were minimal. The station survived. The fleet did not. 3 pirate ships were disabled by tactical sabotage executed by human cadets. Ray had rigged a gravity well destabilizer with parts scavenged from kitchen equipment and waste processors. When the council convened days later, the surviving alien leaders were unanimous in their feedback. One sentence echoed across languages and protocols: do not underestimate Deathworld cadets. Track kept a replay of Ray's actions archived in his private log, under a title he'd never expected to write: Advisor Candidate, Human Tier. The galaxy had finally begun to understand. Earth's greatest export wasn't its weaponry or technology. It was its people, the kind who stared into the void and didn't flinch, the kind who smiled at extinction and said, "Not today." And as the stars turned and new wars brewed, every species remembered the same lesson, etched into memory by the footsteps of one quiet soldier who walked through fire like it was home. Ray didn't remember when her name stopped being Ray and started becoming the human. Somewhere between the joint operations drills and the corridor fire on Deck 9, the cadets from other worlds had stopped referring to her directly. They whispered instead. When they thought she couldn't hear, when they hoped she didn't care. She did. She just didn't show it. The Deathworld cadet program was supposed to be diplomatic, symbolic, a gesture of trust between Earth and the Galactic Concord. A handful of elite human soldiers dropped into a melting pot of aliens to show cooperation could win wars better than fear. But the problem with symbols was that they were easy to misread. Most species assumed the humans were sent to prove something: strength, maybe dominance. What Ray knew, and what her team understood with bone-deep clarity, was that Earth hadn't sent them to impress anyone. They'd been sent because they could survive anything. Her team was small. Lieutenant Dario Mendez, tactical prodigy, soft-spoken, calculating. Specialist Yulin Zhang, engineer, explosive expert, with a laugh that came too easily and eyes that missed nothing. And then there was Juno. No last name, no past she spoke of. She rarely talked at all, but when she moved, it was like the air made space for her. Each of them had scars, both the kind you could see and the kind you pretended weren't there. But they worked like gears in a machine, tightly wound, silent in motion, deadly when triggered. Their current assignment was a live exercise on Ganner 3, an uninhabited jungle moon with hostile terrain and fluctuating gravity. The scenario was simple: secure the extraction point before an enemy unit could beat them to it. Half the cadets from the Concord had failed the test last cycle. Ray's team was paired with a detachment of Thalaxians, tall, angular beings with 4 arms and a strict adherence to protocol. Tension simmered before they even touched dirt. As they prepped gear aboard the drop shuttle, one of the Thalaxians, a commander named Reluin, studied Ray like she was a broken weapon. "Your team lacks cohesion," he said flatly. "Your methods are improvisational. Your liabilities." Zhang laughed, snapping the safety on her charge pack. "Guess we'll just have to improvise our way to victory again." Reluin didn't respond. He didn't have to. His disdain clung to every word like frost. The jungle welcomed them with a shriek of wind and the stench of decay. Trees twisted like serpents, vines pulsed with movement, and the soil seemed to breathe beneath their boots. Within the first hour, the Thalaxian scout unit lost a cadet to a carnivorous plant that mimicked stable ground. Ray's team had already mapped 3 alternate routes, set up a perimeter alarm system using thermal spikes, and harvested local fungus for nutritional backup. Reluin's pride cracked visibly when they crossed the halfway point with no further losses. That night, as the group camped beneath a tangle of bioluminescent canopies, Ray sat cross-legged by the fire, calibrating her sidearm. Mendez sketched notes into his tactical journal. Juno stood watch, eyes distant. Zhang tossed a nutrient ration at a Thalaxian cadet and grinned. You guys really don't do firelight meals? No ghost stories? No marshmallows? The cadet blinked. Marsh, what? Never mind, Zhang muttered. Cultural tragedy. Across the fire, Relyon approached Ray. You lead without rank, he said. Your kind defers to instinct over command. Ray didn't look up. Leadership isn't about rank. It's about what you do when it goes to hell. He considered that. You expect failure. I plan for it. His gaze flicked toward her teammates, laughing softly, alert despite the calm. How does a Deathworld breed loyalty? Ray finally met his eyes. Because on Earth, if you don't trust the person next to you, you don't live long enough to regret it. The extraction point loomed the next morning, but so did an ambush. The enemy unit, other cadets playing hostiles, struck early, setting off a sonic pulse that disoriented half the team. Relyon's command fractured immediately, his orders drowned in noise and panic. But Ray's team didn't freeze. Juno moved like smoke, cutting off angles and clearing a path through confusion. Mendez overrode the compromised comms with a patch he designed for emergencies exactly like this. Zhang laid down directional charges that turned a retreat into an offensive push. Ray moved through the chaos like she'd seen it all before, because she had. When the dust cleared, the objective was secure, the enemy neutralized, and not one life lost. Relyon approached again that evening, bruised pride hidden beneath a forced calm. You were right, he said. Instinct over command. Ray gave him a nod and nothing more. That night, as her team shared coffee laced with field meds under a collapsing sky of stars, Ray leaned back, arms behind her head. We're not better, she said aloud. We're just used to worse. Mendez nodded. That's the lesson, isn't it? Zhang raised her canister. To worse. Juno, as always, said nothing, but her small, rare smile spoke volumes. Somewhere in orbit, a new batch of recruits was watching the footage. Some would misunderstand. Others would scoff. But few would start to learn, the way the galaxy always did, one mistake at a time. And soon enough, they would all know. Survival wasn't about strength. It was about who could keep walking when the ground gave out. The cadets from Earth never stopped walking. They arrived on Echelon Prime just before dusk, when the atmosphere burned gold and the clouds sank low like bruised thunderheads. The planet was beautiful in a sharp, unkind way. Fissured stone ridges, skies tinged with metal, and forests that grew in silence instead of song. It was a place made for testing limits, and that's exactly why the Concord had chosen it. This wasn't a training mission. The Concord Council had flagged an emergent anomaly, a string of disappearances from fringe colonies, no distress signals, no debris, only silence. Echelon Prime was the last known location linked by the pattern. Whatever had happened to those outposts, it started here. The cadets had been called in not as learners, but as instruments, not to observe but to survive, and if necessary, to kill. For once, Ray didn't argue with the mission brief. There was no diplomacy here, no alliance dance. Just the unknown waiting to be met with grit and instinct. The Deathworld cadets were assigned to lead reconnaissance with a mixed team of senior operatives and Concord specialists. No one questioned it this time. They landed under the cover of dusk, boots crunching on mineral-laced soil that shimmered faintly. Ray's team fanned out automatically. Zhang calibrated motion sensors. Mendez unpacked the drone. Juno, already crouched at the tree line, motioned once, movement. Not close, but watching. 2 hours in, they found the remains of the first colony base. Not destroyed, emptied. Equipment still powered, meals half-eaten, doors open. Not a single trace of blood. No signs of struggle. No biological residue. Just gone. It was Mendez who broke the silence. This feels wrong. Like a trap set for people who think it's not a trap. Zhang scanned the room with a portable spectrometer. There's no biological trace. Not even bacteria on the utensils. That's not possible, Ray said. Even sterilization leaves something. Juno walked past them without speaking. heading toward a flicker of motion on the outer sensor net. She paused at the threshold of the command tent and pointed upward. There, etched into the fabric in blackened, clawed marks, were 3 words in human English. "You last longest." Ray felt the cold start in her spine. She looked at the alien specialists, 2 Jalari, 1 Thalaxian, and a Kasari linguist. All of them stared at the message with expressions that didn't need translation. It wasn't just a disappearance. It was a message, and it was meant for them. That night, the forest screamed. No one saw what attacked first. One of the Jalari disappeared mid-sentence, gone from existence, as if a curtain had dropped over reality itself. Sensors failed. Optics blurred. Ray barked orders, dragging the survivors into defensive formation, but the forest played tricks. Sounds bent. Shapes shifted. Distant whispers crawled into their ears, saying their names and voices not their own. Zhang clutched her rifle tight. This isn't tech. This is something older, something alive. Ray didn't argue. There was no time for theory, only survival. They moved under cover of dark, the moon casting jagged silver lines over their backs as they pushed deeper into the forest, away from where the attacks had begun. Ray kept Juno close, watching the way her eyes cut through the illusion, how she moved as though guided by something primal, intuitive. They reached a clearing at dawn and set up a temporary shelter. Of the original 18, only 10 remained. The others were gone without screams, without warning. It was as if Echelon had simply absorbed them. The Kasari linguist, delirious with fear, began muttering phrases from ancient galactic dialects, cross-referencing myths about the hollowing, a theoretical predator that didn't feed on flesh but on presence, erasing life from memory and time. Zhang shook her head. That's a ghost story. So we're Deathworlders, Ray replied quietly. The conflict now was survival against an enemy with no face, no shape, and no known weakness. But for Ray and her team, it was not unfamiliar. They had grown up in chaos. On Earth, the enemy was never just bullets or bombs. It was entropy, hunger, time, the creeping void of hopelessness. And that's what this place was. Echelon wasn't just hunting them. It was testing who would give up first. Ray didn't intend to be the one. She gathered the team in a tight circle. We fight this with discipline. We mark every path, set beacons on 10-second intervals, double back on every route. If you hear something, see something, don't follow unless you're sure. Mendez nodded. Pattern mapping. Disrupt the behavior loop. We become the predictable thing in the unpredictable forest. Ray said. That night, something tried to mimic their voices. It called to them from the trees. Ray's own voice begged for help 30 feet away. Zhang's laugh echoed from the distance. Mendez's sobs whispered through the wind. None of them moved. Juno sat at the edge of the light, knives in hand, her breathing steady. Dawn came again, and they were still there. Fewer, but alive. They'd made it through a night designed to break minds. And that was the first sign, just a glimmer, that the thing hunting them wasn't omnipotent. It expected fear. It fed on instinct. But Deathworlders didn't break the same way others did. The next move would be theirs. And somewhere, Ray was sure, the thing was watching and learning the same lesson every other species had. Humans didn't always win, but they never stopped fighting. They made a plan, not because they believed it would work, but because humans needed motion the way others needed air. Sitting still had never saved them. Waiting had never been an answer. By the 4th day, Echelon Prime had peeled away the last of their assumptions. The creature or force or entity was no longer hiding. It played with them now, reshaping the terrain in subtle ways, bending time in loops so small they almost missed them. Jean discovered a loop when she spotted her own discarded ration wrapper at the base of a tree she hadn't passed twice. Mendez confirmed the anomaly with his drone logs. 10 minutes of footage duplicated with only a 3-second variance. We're not being hunted, he muttered. We're being studied. Ray didn't flinch. Then let's teach something worth remembering. What remained of the team converged in the only defensible structure they'd found, an abandoned processing station built into a cliff face. It was old tech, human design, pre-Concord. Scratched into the walls were names. Hundreds of them, None matched the known colonists. Failed expeditions, Zhang whispered. No records. Wiped clean. Juno traced a name with her fingertips. Her face gave nothing away, but Ray noticed a tension in her jaw. Someone she recognized? Maybe. Ray didn't ask. Time was running short. That night, they made their stand. Mendez laid out directional EM pulses calibrated to disrupt phase anomalies. Zhang built traps from repurposed beacon emitters and fusion core overloads. Juno set motion lures, silent, deadly, impossible to trace once triggered. Ray took the highest point of the structure and waited. It didn't take long. Reality buckled in a soft wave as the entity came closer. The air thickened. Sound warped. From the forest came voices, impossible voices. Parents long dead. Commanders lost in space. Lovers who'd never left Earth. Grief as a weapon. Memory sharpened into a blade. Ray heard her brother's voice. You left me. She didn't move. Zhang heard her mother's last breath. Juno heard silence. And Mendez heard a lullaby in Spanish, half remembered. But none of them moved. The entity pressed harder, manifesting at the forest's edge like a shadow not shaped by light, but by fear itself. It wasn't solid. It wasn't smoke. It was suggestion made manifest, a blank space the mind filled in with its own worst truths. Juno struck first. Her blade carved through the illusion, not to harm it, but to break the loop. The movement shattered the visual tether. The traps lit like wildfire. Zhang's lures blazed, forcing the thing back. Mendez triggered the pulse grid. The entity flinched, not in pain, but in confusion. It wasn't used to resistance. Ray dropped from her perch like a falling star, rifle in hand. She didn't fire. She didn't need to. She walked straight toward it. You picked the wrong species, she said. The entity wavered. Not from fear. It didn't feel that, but from uncertainty. Something in its design couldn't understand defiance, unlinked to survival. The others it had consumed, they had run, begged, broken. But these humans, these Deathworlders, walked into death like it owed them a favor. Behind her, the others joined formation. No speech, no dramatics, just a wall of intent, grounded in shared pain and sharpened into a weapon. The entity retreated. The team didn't follow. They held the line. Minutes passed, then an hour, then a silence deeper than any they'd known. And it was over. No one declared victory. They just started breathing again. The anomaly faded. The forest's unnatural quiet gave way to real sound, wind, insects, the rustle of living things. The team secured a path back to the extraction point. No further attacks. No more illusions. Whatever intelligence had haunted Echelon Prime had withdrawn. Back aboard the orbital transport, the debriefing was brief. No enemy corpses. No recordings that made sense. Only human accounts backed by partial telemetry and environmental distortion patterns. The Concord labeled it an unresolved contact anomaly. Case closed. But something changed. Word spread. In whispered briefings, in quiet councils. What humans had faced on Echelon wasn't just another battlefield. It was something older, something unknown, and they'd walked through it, not unscathed, not untouched, but unbroken. Ray stood at the edge of the viewing deck a week later, watching the stars slide past. Juno joined her, quiet as always. Zhang leaned against the railing, nursing a busted wrist. Mendez arrived last, holding a mug of synthetic coffee. No one spoke for a long time. Finally, Zhang exhaled. Do you think it learned? Ray didn't answer right away. Then she nodded. Yeah, it learned. Mendez sipped his drink. What exactly? Juno's voice came, low and quiet. That we don't go quietly. And they didn't. In the files of alien civilizations, beneath layers of cautionary data and diplomatic language, a new term began appearing. Quiet, ominous, reverent. Cadets of the Deathworld. They weren't the strongest. They weren't the fastest. But they walked into the unknown and made it blink first. And in time, even the stars will remember them.